and welcome to this meeting of the Housing Subcommittee. May I just remind members that these proceedings will be recorded and made available for public listening. Just before, start the meeting, we'll go into Sederunt and Apologies, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We have two apologies this morning, one from Councillor Carruthers and one from Councillor Mayo. We have Councillor Gilroy here substituting for Councillor.
Jeff.
Councillor Smith's indicated he is attending, but I think he's at the launch of the jobs fair of the Crichton.
Thank you. Just before we go into the discussion in the meeting, just a quick update for members. As was requested at the last Housing Sub, I have had a meeting with the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust and the Marithan District Action Group with reference to the project that is going on out there. That meeting was held in Wigton Town Hall. Mr. O'Neill and myself attended that meeting. There was quite a full and frank discussion, shall we say, took place at that meeting. But at the end of the day, I think it was quite a positive outcome. The Communities Housing Trust were made aware of the situation and what they needed to do to enhance forthgoing communication between the groups. And we have taken a commitment that any communications that is made between the two groups will come through Jim O'Neill and myself, so that we can just monitor progress of communications going forward and actions that were delegated within that. Yes, Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. I'm delighted to hear your comments. I may say that they certainly mirror the views of the community representatives, the Marithan District Action Group representatives. They were delighted with the positive and robust discussion that took place, and more importantly with the outcomes. And they've asked me to thank both Jim and you very much indeed for your involvement on their behalf. I think their take, sir, was that there were certain aspects which it was too late to address, particularly in the Marith context, but what you're putting in place or what you're proposing to put in place will benefit the rest of the region as a consequence. And they were very supportive of that. So thanks very much indeed, personally, but also on behalf of that particular community, both of you.
And just following on from that as well, Alistair, there'll be a briefing note to that meeting coming out, and I will make sure that the local ward members are included in that. Just following on from that as well, at the last committee we did ask the Housing Trust if they would prepare a new business plan that could be presented to this committee so that we could align our objectives going forward. I believe that has been sent through now, and it will be presented to a future meeting of this committee for discussion. Okay, moving on to the committee. Do we have any declarations of interest? Finlay?
Item 4, 2.7. I'm involved in a company that does work for food trade, so I'll not take part in that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay. Moving on to item 3, Home Energy Scotland area-based scheme. We have with us Vernon Monaghan, who is a project manager, for the Heap SAPS programme with the Energy Agency, and Vernon's sitting over at the back at there. And if there are any questions that you would like to put to Vernon, I'm sure that he'd be delighted to help you with that. So if you'd like to come forward, Vernon, please, onto the front. Thank you. Okay, the purpose of this report is to summarise the key outcomes of the Home Energy Efficiency Programme area-based scheme for the 2014-15 and to confirm the detail of the programme and allocation of funding for the 15-16 programme. John, have you anything to add to this report?
No, thanks, Chair. Nothing further to add to the report, but as the Chair says, either myself or Vernon would be happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'll open it up to members. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No really a question. I'm quite happy with outcomes and also the proposed schemes. I noticed that we have a 10% increase again in the core funding this year. which is over and above the 20% we got last year. Have we any indication of the likelihood of the funding that we'll get from the extra bid that we're putting in?
John?
Thanks, Chair. Not at this stage. I don't think the announcement of the challenge fund has been confirmed by the Scottish Government. What they've done over previous years is they haven't increased the total national pot. They've just made the core allocation a bigger proportion of that pot. So as our core funding has increased to 1.7 million, the potential to bid for additional funding, that pot has reduced proportionately. So it's currently 12 million across the whole of Scotland. We have put a bid in as detailed in the report relating to specifically Upper Nithsdale, but we're awaiting the outcome of that bidding process. But we'll certainly advise members as and when we hear the outcome of that process.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks. I noticed it didn't say, and you're at liberty to say how much we actually bid for, because I say it's nice to see that we've had over 30% increase in the core funding, but I believe from memory we had actually an increase in the extra funding that we got last year as well. So it would be nice if we could get it again this year.
Yes.
Yes, Chair, I don't have that figure actually to hand. I can deliver it as soon as it's available. I just don't have the figure with me. It relates fairly close, I think, last year.
Can I just ask on that, within the extra allocation that we've applied for, if we don't get the full allocation, will that mean a reduction in the projects that we would be looking to do within the 15-16?
That wouldn't share. What we've done is specifically say that the additional funding allocation would relate to the Upper Nithsdale project. If we were unsuccessful in getting that additional funding in relation to that project, all the other projects would go forward as stated, and the Upper Nithsdale project would then feature as a potential priority for next year's funding. So we kind of roll it up into the 16-17 programme.
Jeff?
Yeah, I'm very pleased to welcome the additional funding. But to what extent are local businesses actually benefiting from this? I remember when the Scottish Executive Central Heating Programme was brought in, there was a big lag between the funding coming in and local businesses actually gearing up in order to install the boilers in the central heating programme. We had an awful lot of people coming in from Glasgow right down to the Midlands doing the work. And then, of course, that petered out. So, you know, what encouragement are we giving to local businesses to get involved in this?
Mr. Monaghan?
Yes, I absolutely concede this is an issue on projects of this nature. The protocols for procurement are such that there's a fairly high bar set in terms of the qualifications that a contributing contractor has to bring to the table. And it has been a problem, particularly, as you say, for heating contractors who, under the scheme, have to have accreditation under the Green Deal and various other obligations to fulfill in terms of paperwork. Very, very onerous, actually, for small local businesses. I have to say that under the current project, we have sought to depart slightly from that, in as much as some of the more rural householders in Dumfries and Galloway have had sort of difficulty getting a service from the large provider, SSE, who are managing the project. And we have actually sought to go to a few local installers to see whether or not installation is done quicker within the time scale. This is partly arisen the pressures of time scale, but it's an interesting experiment, if you like, at the moment, to see how much we can encourage and move towards looking at local installers. We don't have view at the moment as to how that will be able to roll forward. But it is we definitely recognise the difficulties that face any contractors in this project seeking local contractors. We are monitoring it. We try to encourage local suppliers to get the accreditation possible. It is extremely onerous. And I think a small local heating installer who's running a perfectly happy business locally, serving the community for boiler repairs and new finds it very difficult to justify spending money and time to get the kind of accreditation required under the deal, which is imposed by the government.
Yes, Jeff, come back.
Well, this is my concern, is it does lead to a lot of cherry picking in terms of the SSE, for example, and their main subcontractors. You know, if it's a single applicant, single job, effectively, then we'll park that and go for the the groups of jobs that they can actually tackle. So, you know, continually you'll get the single applicant being pushed further and further back, and they may be the ones who most need. And just a bit before you answer that one, we often get constituents asking who they should apply to in terms of grants. Is it yourselves at the Action Scotland? If so, could we have contact details? And that's not just the members of the housing subcommittee, but all elected members. I think we need to know how to point people in the right direction.
Mr. Moran?
Well, regarding the first point, of course, we have an obligation that we take extremely serious at the Energy Agency to manage the project such that it's not run by SSE or any other overarching contractor. They have obligations, clearly. What I'm describing as a situation that's arisen probably due to the timescales found that actually has some benefit, clearly, to encourage local contractors. I can't say whether or not that's something that we're going to be able to change in terms of the rules. With regard to making contact and applications, we operate on the basis of a referral system. Referrals are normally put through Home Energy Scotland Advice Centre, Dock and Crew, which is the caterpillar you'll see in the television. And Home Energy Scotland Advice Centre will gather and capture details of if appropriate and eligible, pass through to referral. Clearly, I think what you're recognising is very difficult to capture attention from a widespread. Is a difficulty, and it's something we try to improve upon. We do undertake fairly extensive lecturing of areas to target the council, and that does produce fairly healthy return in terms of potential referral. Word of mouth is, of course, hugely important in terms of interest from local communities. I think if there is a lack of clarity about how people should respond, we can certainly look at whether or not market take. We do find actually out in most of the communities knowledge about it. And yes, it is difficult to ensure that.
John, I'd like to add a bit into that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just in terms of Councillor Lever's request, we can certainly arrange for all the marketing information and contact details from the Energy Agency to be supplied to all members, so you can say exactly what's happening and you know who to refer on if you have any constituents who you think may be interested in the scheme. We'll get that. Thank you.
I mean, I do have to agree that I think it's a lost opportunity, especially for Dumfries and Galloway, for the economic benefit of this. We all can see by the papers the fuel poverty benefit that the scheme gains for our area, but I do think it's a lost opportunity on employment and the economics of it by having local tradesmen and companies being involved within the installation of the various parts of this scheme. It is something that I brought up with the First Minister when she had a visit down in Dumfries earlier on this year, and she just asked me to speak to Alex Neil about it, but it's a point that I feel quite strongly about as well, because I mean, the extra benefit, this is a 10-year programme. The government have committed to 10 years of funding for this, albeit they will only commit 12 months funding at a time. We did ask at a housing conveners meeting up in Edinburgh with the housing minister if they would consider running it in a possible 3-year scheme, but they declined that, and they said that the guarantee is that we will have this money available for 10 years, and that is as far as they would commit to. So I do think it's a lost opportunity for us. I do think that again, there may be, because it's not just Dumfries and Galloway, there are other rural areas throughout the country who will benefit from the scheme and will have the same sort of issues that we do here. And I think that it might have been an idea for the Energy Agency to set up some sort of training so that businesses could be accredited to carry out the types of work that's involved, whether it's from the insulation side of it on the solid wall hard to treat properties. Because at the original offset of this programme, I think in the papers that we had, it did say that this would be focused for small builders and joiners within the rural areas. And that has never come off, and I'm quite disappointed about that. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I think Jeff must have read my script. That was much of my question. But I think one of the things that surprised me, a number of folk that have approached me and said they weren't aware the scheme was in operation. So I think two questions. One, are you going to resend the literature around the target areas? And B, a suggestion that maybe, I mean, my local community council claimed that none of the members had ever heard of the scheme. So we should be trying to contact, I believe, organisations like pensioners groups, community councils and others that are in a position to share that information and disseminate it to the community, because although you're right, there are successes, and you did acknowledge so that we don't seem to be reaching all of the folk, and I just hope that we'll resend the literature to all of these areas we're targeting, and that we might find different ways of sharing that information through different community groups.
Mr. Monan?
Yes, if I could just pick up on that. I actually wrongly introduced as a project manager, in fact, coordinator for Dumfries and Galloway. So there's a manager who Alan McGonagall probably could speak about strategy and energy agency market. However, we have had a history of holding events. It is something that we probably look at again, I quite agree, for this. And we can certainly take that on where we can hold events locally. We have done that in the past. We've gone to some community councils. But, you know, the target audience is sometimes quite difficult to winkle out. However, just as an example, this project this year for the heating project, we actually used the hub to distribute market material for heating installation. And that was quite a mixed response. We sent out some 300 flyers to captive audience of own fuel poor candidates, client base, and with very, very poor response. So sometimes actually, you know, it's not that easy, even sending literature out. Sometimes doesn't receive any kind of attention. The problem we do face is that there's so many other players out there bombarding people with offers here, and we often get the feedback people are confused about that. So we need to look at that, and we will make every effort to get the
Just on that as well, I think, as you say, Mr. Monaghan, there are many other leaflets and flyers coming through people's door offering these type of services, but it might be quite important to try and get it out there that this is a council-endorsed project, and that would give consumers confidence in applying to this one rather than some of the others that are out there. John?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to confirm to members, we'll certainly take on board the comments that have been made in terms of the marketing and the awareness raising within the communities. as Vernon says, we meet regularly with Vernon and Alan McGonigal, his boss, and we'll certainly take on board the comments and feed that into our next contract monitoring meeting, see if we can kind of refresh and update the marketing and communication strategy, because it's in everyone's interest to kind of maximise the reach of this programme.
Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. As far as I'm concerned, part of John's taking on board, to use his phraseology, should start with us amending today the recommendations in section 2 of the report. I think the comments that you've made earlier on about lost opportunities, etc., they're totally in point, sir. I couldn't agree more with you. And I think at the end of the day that they should be reiterated as recommendations arising from today's discussion, and we should pursue them yet again. And then going back to what two colleagues, Jim and Jeff, have said, I think again, we should be making reference in the recommendations to really working up a focused and targeted publicity campaign, and we should be monitoring the outcomes and the effects of that as well. And I make no apologies for saying that, when we come to that part of the meeting, that we should be expanding the recommendations to include these 2 points with a view to getting the maximum amount of outcomes that we can for this authority, and more importantly for the people of Dumfries and Galloway. My question, Chair, in the back of that is 5 projects, paragraph 3.5.1. No problems for the record, sir, with any of these. Just a question in relation to the 3rd project, Rural Solid Wall Project, region-wide. Any indication, Chair, of the numbers of houses that we would be perhaps talking about in that particular category? Thank you.
Jim, would you, or Ms. Monaghan then?
Yeah, I don't actually have the Schedule 1 details in front of me. The numbers, I think, if you could bear with me, I'll I don't have the number in front of me, and I can report that to the committee.
If you would please, then, if we get that information out. Finlay? Sorry, John.
Thanks. Sorry, Chair. Just by way of illustration, although we haven't got the figures for the 15-16 programme, in terms of the 13-14 programme, the numbers in terms of that element was 130, approximately 130 properties came under that element of the programme in 13-14. So we're likely to see a similar kind of scale, maybe a slight increase because the core allocation of funding is increased. But that's the kind of scale of intervention that we're looking at for that element.
Finlay?
Yeah, just to add my support to having a look at the marking material. I think the very nature of the energy efficiency market out there, that there's lots of fly-by-nights, a huge amount of information where a lot of the people that are being targeted are the elderly, and they're very, very suspicious. We're back to the days where we have your double glazing, triple glazing companies going out there and not necessarily doing a good job. We've got to make sure that the marketing is clearly identified as Dumfries and Galloway Council or Scottish Government to give folk reassurance that they're not going to get some guy on the phone from the Central Belt trying to sell them something that they don't need. Certainly that was an issue that was raised at this committee some time ago.
Thank you, Finlay. Jane?
Councillor Geddes has really actually asked the question that I was interested in as well, about the numbers of owners and private renters, particularly in the rural areas, who are actually taking advantage of this. Because, we all know of young families up rural roads, and whether or not this is actually being targeted, particularly at the landlords, say this is doable. Why are you not doing it? I would be asking, in some ways, that there should be a proactive effort to get landlords to promote the scheme, and I don't know whether that actually happens.
Mr. Monaghan?
Yes, is this on? We agree that it's actually quite difficult to engage with landlords. It's a very mixed response. Some have been very proactive in looking after interested in energy efficiency medium-term and property long-term. But it is a mixed response. We do find that some landlords have extremely active agents working alongside their tenants, and those have been successes. Others, perhaps landlords have been a bit more distant from it. But we are very active, and it's a major part of the project going forward to look at private tenancy property. And we have had some notable success in 13-14. One particular estate, improvements in a number of properties, very, very active, first place. But it is a very mixed bag. Difficult to know how we actually target landlords and encourage their involvement.
Jane?
I don't know. I mean, I would sort of look to the farming community, I think, in particular, as far as the really rural and damp little cottages up lanes and roads to assist in that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the figures presented in 3.6, you know, where the measures that we've already taken have saved over 5,500 tonnes of carbon emissions. And in the lifetime, they should expect in fuel bill savings in excess of £1.78 million. I think it's quite substantial. And that is only within the second year of the programme running, I think, those figures. So moving this forward with the years ahead that we have guaranteed funding, I mean, there are great savings to be had there in helping fuel poverty. Yes, Patsy?
Just with this, the solid wall project and things, is that something that can be done while people are living in the houses, or is it something that you look to when perhaps the houses are empty? I mean, because is it quite invasive?
It depends on the actual construction of the property as to how they would be able to do it. But Mr. Monaghan?
Yes, it's there are two main core methods depending on the type of construction: external applied insulation, internally applied to solid wall property. Externally applied insulation is a simpler process, less disruptive to householders. It involves basically the erection of scaffolding externally and applying insulation boards, finishing usually a rough cast finish. And that is appropriate for many of the system-built type properties. It's very appropriate for terraced properties. Where we come to more rural properties, historic buildings, village properties, and isolated country properties, very often sandstone-faced buildings, architecturally important exterior, then clearly external insulation isn't appropriate, and internal insulation is the option that we're looking to install. Now that in itself can be quite disruptive to the householders. The external parts of any external wall parts of any room in the property. It doesn't thus far depend on the householder decanting from the property. Measures can be taken by the contractor to make sure that these are considered fully to protect existing interiors, to protect the householder from the work going on, and that has been done quite successfully. Difficulties arise where we have much more ornate interiors, which of course applies to many properties in Dumfries and Galloway, and negotiations very often founder where householders just simply don't want to lose features. The project can't fund a complete restoration of a historic interior. So there are difficulties with internal wall insulation, but we have managed to, the contractor we have working currently on 14-15 projects is more skilled with internal wall insulation, and we're finding that we're able to negotiate with it done.
I mean, I can just see why people perhaps are not willing to have that disruption. But does the whole project put everything back to normal for tenants or occupants, whatever? You know, or do you get landed with quite a big redecorating bill and all the rest
well,
of it?
Well, the project doesn't, in normal circumstances, fund redecoration. It returns the interior surfaces to pre-decoration state normally. But we do have within the project an enabling budget where in certain special circumstances we can, depending on where the cost of the project, particular individual job sits relative to the budget, there is a little flexibility in the project to try and leave a happy householder. I mean, we're interested in making sure that householders are left a satisfactory job. Yeah, it's a question also of our management of the project. I mean, we don't throw our householders to the wolves by saying you're getting internal wall insulation, good luck with the contractor. We do handhold householders through the process, and where it's clearly not practical or desirable to force the issue with our householder, we'll try and advise them if compromise is possible, or indeed if it may make sense to walk away from it because it's just possible to do. So we do try to, we deal with every householder as an individual, and from our management point of view, we do provide a conduit between the householder and the contractor to ensure that their wishes.
Okay, Jim, second time.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of observations before I ask my question. One thing that wasn't covered in Pat's inquiry was conservation areas, and I'm currently supporting a constituent who was encouraged to believe he would be getting this external wall cladding put in place, and then at a later stage the surveyor or whoever it was discovered there's a conservation area and had to rethink the whole process. And I think maybe it'd be useful if checks were made in advance of visits, especially in main streets and where there are traditional style buildings or properties, to ensure that you don't raise folks' hopes and then at a later date have to go back and say, by the way. The other thing I wouldn't mind observing, or often an observation, is Jane's point, private landlord registration might be a way we could target each of private landlords through the registration process, leaflet them to say this opportunity is available to you if you want to take advantage of it, and I think that maybe something we could explore. And lastly, I'll maybe declare an interest before I ask this question, but we were talking a long number of years ago about revisiting the banding of properties, because clearly the banding now doesn't reflect the situation. I think it's 15 years since banding was revisited by the assessor's office, and that might well bring in other properties to the qualifying criteria that are currently excluded from it. Mine is one of them. But I just wonder if there isn't where we are, and we might ask the question, because there isn't a guarantee that because you're in a banded property you're no feeling poverty or whatever. So revisiting these bandings might well get an up-to-date picture and allow some other folk to take advantage of a government-sponsored scheme.
John?
Yes. Thanks, Chair. Just picking up on Councillor Dempster's first point, certainly in terms of engagement with private landlords, we do regularly send out through the landlord registration database regular kind of e-bulletins and updates. And I think it's something we've done in the past in terms of heap tabs. We'll revisit that. We also work with the Landlord Accreditation Scotland scheme. We're an affiliate member to that organisation, and we work with them in terms of promoting the scheme when they have local training events and forums. So we are looking at other ways of raising the profile of the programme. In terms of the question about council tax banding and assessment, obviously that's kind of out with the remit for today, but I'll certainly take on board Councillor Dempster's inquiry and pass that through to the assessor, Keith Mossop, and maybe Keith can provide an answer directly.
That's what I was hoping for, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Finlay?
Actually, just a comment. I wonder, on the back of what we've just been told about the rural solid wall insulation, whether there's maybe some information there or a perception that it is too much upheaval. I wonder if there's any opportunity to use case studies in the marketing material to actually show that there is the flexibility to do different things and different properties to reduce the impact, and it may be quite something simple as a case study that would actually change somebody's mind on whether it was suitable for them or not.
Mr. Monahan?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. We have compiled some photographic evidence of the process for purposes of marketing, and we do need to develop that. We, unfortunately, within the housing renewal area in the centre of Dumfries, we've not had as good a response as we'd actually hoped. It's a difficult area, and we can understand why that's the case. But we had at the beginning of this year's project developed the idea of using one of those properties as a case study, getting a contractor to complete the work, and then agreement with the landlord to allow that property available for people to see. I think that is something we still pursue. In this year's project, BCA Insulation have their own training facilities, and they have quite a lot of extra material for internal insulation. And I think it's a good idea to engage with them to see either through the use of an event or indeed distributable marketing material, put together something to describe more detail. We do provide information to all of our householders on the process. A general leaflet does talk through the main issues. There's nothing quite like seeing it. So either good illustrated material or indeed maybe presentation at an event can actually show samples of it, if not a completed project. But I think it would be our intention to try to capture the goodwill of one or two of the completed householders this year.
I do agree, Finlay. I think that's a good point, actually, because my travels throughout the region have come across properties in various stages of the works going forward, and because I understand what's going on with the properties, whereas members of the public might not understand what's going on with all the scaffolding and insulation being fixed to the external side of properties like that. And then when you see the property complete at the end of it, and it looks really good, and of course they have the added benefit of insulation is in place now, and they have a new coat of render or rough cast depending on the area that it is, or wet dash or whatever it may be, but it certainly improves the property considerably, and that would be a good way of getting it out and possibly encouraging uptake on that as well. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. Just going back to Jim Dempster's point that a year and a half ago, Port Huron District Business Association organised a seminar on a Saturday morning, in relation to sort of this work pertaining not only to buildings in outstanding conservation areas, but also listed buildings. And the speaker was Dr. Moses Jenkins from Historic Scotland, and it was extremely worthwhile and informative. And I would suggest that that's a useful contact point, I'm sure the problem is not, well, I know it's not confined particularly to other communities the length and breadth of the region where similar problems will pertain, sir. And I would suggest in the circumstances it might be well worthwhile making contact with Dr. Jenkins through Historic Scotland. As I say, it was well worth the admission money, which was free for the record. It was superb, it really was.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Any further members? Oh, okay, we can turn to the recommendations, please. 2.1, note the summary of outcomes thus far in relation to the 14-15 programme, detailed at 3.4 of the report. 2.2, note the funding allocation of 1.703 million for home energy efficiency programme area-based scheme in 15-16, and this represents a 10% increase on the core funding for 14-15. 2.3, agree the continuation of the projects within the programme for 15-16, detailed at 3.5 of the report. And on top of that, Claire, could you just add in some extra recommendations as asked for?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. From my notes here, I've got, I agree that there have been lost opportunities to bring economic benefits to Dumfries and Galloway in the Scottish Government and Council endorsed programme, but examples being use of local companies, lack of provision of training, and the avenues to be continued to be explored to involve local business. And secondly, agree that marketing of this council endorsed programme should be more focused and targeted to increase awareness, and noted that this would also be monitored through the contract management.
Alistair?
In relation to item 4, sir, I would like to think we'd include in the recommendation that we revisit this. I think that's the whole object of the exercise. We don't take no for an answer. You know, I think the validity of what you said was, as far as I'm concerned, was unchallengeable. So let's go back and let's keep hammering on the door. So I would wish to see that incorporated into the 4th recommendation, with your leave.
Members happy with that? Okay, yeah, take that note, please note that. So that would come in as recommendations 2.4 and 2.5. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, scheme of assistance. The purpose of this report is to present a review of the operation of the Council's scheme of assistance for homeowners and private sector tenants for 14-15. The report also sets out emerging policy issues and proposed budget allocations for 15-16. Now, due to the various elements of this report, and for this to save some confusion, what I would like to do with this is take each section in this report in its own merits, have questions from members, discuss that until we're happy with that, and then move forward to the next one rather than jump back and forward. I think it would be easier for everybody if members are happy with that. Thank you. So we'll move on to the first part of it, which was the care and repair service performance. John, have you anything to add? Oh, sorry, Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing to add.
Members?
Would it be possible, sir, to get some form of definition, you know, between the criteria, critical and substantial? I mean, I notice in the report, in this section of the report, Chair, that we are amending it and dropping off the substantial aspect and leaving it only in relation to critical. And it would be worthwhile, don't necessarily have to get it today, but perhaps offline, be worthwhile getting some form of definition or illustration as to what will now, in fact, be the practical outcome from that, Chair.
Jim, could you just...
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Proposed to email out to members of the subcommittee the Council's eligibility and priority framework that has those definitions contained within it.
Alistair?
That'd be good, sir, but perhaps also all 47 members, you know, because I mean, there's no reason why, you know, someone, you know, not on this subcommittee can maybe approached by a constituent on behalf, you know. If you're doing it for the members of the subcommittee, I don't think I'm a Luddite, but I wouldn't think it would be too much extra work to do it for the remaining cohort, Chair, would it?
No, I don't think that would be a problem. I think the extra members could be added in. Jane?
It was really just about client outcomes in 3.4, looking at client outcomes with respect to small repairs and home support service. Care and repair seems to do rather better with satisfaction percentages, and I just wondered if officers could maybe explain why that could possibly be.
Jim, do you have any information on that?
Thanks, Chair. I think the main point would be that the services are delivered by different organisations and have different purposes. So the care and repair service generally involves an occupational therapist being involved in fairly significant health issues. So there's a very person-centred approach to the service delivery, whereas by the very nature of the handyvan service, it's about small repairs. And I think that maybe the different levels of satisfaction relate to the different ways the services are assessed and delivered, would be what I could offer at this point in time. But I could look into it further. I think it's probably a reflection of the different types of service. One's more about adaptations related to health issues, whereas the other's generally more preventative and general repairs issues.
Yes, Jane?
Yes, I absolutely take that, and I read that as well. But I just the one that I looked at was that I feel less anxious about my safety and security in my home, which you could possibly skew that to think that I don't know, somebody'd had a window repaired or they'd had a curtain put back up or whatever, and their safety and security, that might, you know, those two things might be comparable. and one is only 88% and the other is 100. I do accept that, but I'm interested why there should be 100% in one, not so much in the other.
I take it that the questions on the feedback forms are exactly the same going out to either service, but I suppose it depends on the answer that the individual actually puts within that particular box of the question. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I'd be happy to look into it further and go back to both organisations and do a bit of work with them to find out why they think that that might be the case, and report it back to the next subcommittee when the minutes been agreed.
Okay with that, Jim? I mean, it's encouraging all the same to see that there are such high satisfaction returns on both the programmes that are available to them. So, I mean, that is encouraging as well. Jeff?
Just on the back of that, obviously in terms of care and repairs, something like a 95% return of the number of people who've actually had work done, whereas on the small repairs and home services, around 20% return. That might be some of the explanation for the skewing in terms of the responses.
Members, any further questions on the care and repair service performance? No? Okay, thank you. We move on to the second part, empty homes. Jim, have you anything to add to this part of the report?
Thanks, Chair. It's just to let members know that in their thinking about this proposal, what we denied to was future budget pressures within the council, which is why we've come back with a shared services approach. But obviously, if members agree that a different approach would be more suitable for Dumfries and Galloway, then it would be entirely possible to do that as well.
Members? Jim?
Thanks, Chair. It's not so much about the report that's presented here today, but, and I can't remember whether it was here or an EEI committee, but we set up a pilot project of 4 priority properties that were to be tackled, that they're empty homes, either to be brought back into use or to be particularly addressed as a pilot scheme to see how successful that would be. Anna House, Stranraer, one in Lockerbie, one in Kirkconnell, one in Sanquhar. As far as I can see, they haven't progressed at all. So if it wasn't here, can we ask the committee or the officer delegated with that duty to report to members on the current status? Because it's one of these things that seems to have gone to sleep, and it is a serious problem for the whole of the region, empty and abandoned properties, especially in high-profile locations. And I'd appreciate some form of response from someone within the service on where we are with that.
John, could you answer that one?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Dempster was referring to the derelict property strategy pilot that's part of the economic development operation. It doesn't form part of our work, but I'll certainly take those comments back to the Director and Head of Service in P&E, EI, and ask for them to provide an update, but it's a separate strand of work.
Much appreciated, Chair.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I'm concerned. I mean, it was obviously recognised by this committee, or the subcommittee, and by Policy and Resources, that this has been a very good investment in terms of the part-time post. And it says in the report that 10 homes had been brought back into use, and the part-time post holder had an active caseload of 44. I think that's why you agreed to fund a full-time post in addition to that. And I'm concerned now that we've been told that we should go back to a part-time post. And okay, I appreciate the budgetary pressures, but I do think this is an excellent investment. I don't know why we're going back to a part-time post again, so I would go back to the original recommendations that we fund a full-time post. I'm a little concerned that it's 16 months since Policy and Resources agreed we should go to a full-time post. We still have this situation, so I don't want this to be like the common housing register again, that this just drifts further and further back, and you know, we don't actually get someone in place full-time on this, working for Dumfries and Galloway in terms of bringing back these homes, because it's an excellent investment as far as I can see.
I think, Jeff, yeah, and in the basis of the report, the figures speak for themselves, and as you say, this was agreed by this committee, I think, quite a while ago, and has been agreed by Policy and Resources and they have supplied the funding to fund a full-time officer for Dumfries and Galloway itself. And I'm more than happy to take that forward, but I'll leave that up to members as well. Jim, just would you like any comments on that before I go to members?
Thanks, Chair. The current post holder's contract runs out at the end of August this year. So in terms of making the transition from the part-time post to the full-time post, it would need to align with that. So we're not actually losing time in terms of implementing the full-time. The current post holder has unfortunately quite a serious illness and spent a long time off work, and that has resulted in a contract ending.
I presume if we're to go ahead and agree from this committee that we would be looking to appoint a full-time officer, then that would have to go through the proper procedure to see if we can attract an officer in. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be the same person that is operating now. Scottish Borders may wish to take that person on as part-time through their own scheme, but I mean, that's a decision for them.
Thanks, Chair. What we'd need to do is take advice from Human Resources and clarify whether there's any 2P issues in relation to the current post holder, and we would need to proceed on the basis of advice received from them. But there is enough work at the moment to support a full-time post, and certainly, if that's what members decide, we'd be very happy to accept a full-time post because the work is there.
Okay. John?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on a slightly separate point in terms of the decision back in December 13 to fund the full-time post, that was in effect forecasting the income that would be generated from the long-term MTs initiative, and that was to be partly ring-fenced. That long-term MT charge only commenced in November 14, so we didn't lose time there. We just didn't have the money to allocate against that resource. So we implemented the long-term MT charge from the 1st of November. Now the income's coming through. We're able to move on it now, but we weren't able to move on it between December 13 and November 14 because the funding for that post wasn't with the council because we basically hadn't levied the charge.
Alistair?
Chair, can I say the point I wanted to raise under this section was somewhat different? I am well aware that there are other members who still want to come in on this point. So with your leave, sir, I'll give way, but if you'd let me come back in before we leave this section, I'd be grateful. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Alistair. Members on the same point then? Jim?
Yeah, Chair. I sat in your position in September 2012 when the extra recommendation was brought in by this committee that we wanted a full-time post. The report come back March 13. It then went to Policy and Resources, and then we've agreed again that it's a full-time post. As far as I'm concerned, I want the Dumfries and Galloway to have a full-time post. I want the £40,000 that Policy and Resources said that we could use for a full-time post. I want it, and I'm perfectly happy to move that when we get to the recommendations that it's changed to 40,000 and it's a full-time post.
Okay. Any other members on the same point? Jane?
I'm sort of no expert on this, but I just think we should be sort of quite careful as things advance. We're actually not looking to increase the number of posts in the council. I mean, I'm presuming that you could have a recognition that the work is there to be done, and there is revenue to cover it clearly from the gain in council tax on reoccupying long-term empty properties. But I would have thought it was also possible to say that this can come back on a rolling business case as to whether or not it's worth doing, where the houses are actually being brought back in, because I don't know. I don't know if any member knows of any house in their ward which has been brought back in. I certainly don't. And I would like to have a bit more information before I simply say I would agree to have this rolling forward as a post, another post to be funded by the council. I'd be much more interested in having a time-limited contract and with targets and advice to members as to where the properties being brought back into use.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, Jane, but it's not another post that we're looking to apply. It's just extending a post from part-time, which we currently pay for, to a full-time post. Because the evidence is there, I think, before, is that the workload is available. And as we all know, throughout the whole region, there are many empty homes that would be better off being brought back into use. And the funding has been allocated, but I'll let other members come in. Jim?
Yeah, thanks for letting me back in, Chair. What we're actually being asked to do in the recommendations is change a decision that's already been made. The decision's been made that we would have a full-time post officer. So this would be a change in the decision, not a decision. It would be a change in the decision. As I say, I want a full-time post for Dumfries and Galloway, and I'm quite happy to move that in the recommendations.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think even as the report stands itself, don't know how much it costs to build a house in Dumfries and Galloway. I don't know what the current figures are for the number of people who are on the RSL waiting list, but already we brought 10 homes back into use. We've got an active caseload of 44. This is going to cost £40,000. I guess the price of building an individual house is somewhere in the region of £120,000, £140,000. So there's an awful lot of slack in the system in terms of the funding. So I think this is a spend to save measure at the end of the day. Simple as that.
Okay, any other members on the same point? Okay, Alistair.
Notwithstanding my earlier remarks, Chair, I think, this is it's now become a procedural issue. I've heard what Councillor Maitland has said. My own view, as well as colleagues, my own view is that we should take this decision today, along the lines that's been indicated, and I would move accordingly that we take the decision today.
Members, any other points? Same point, Jim, or?
Oh, it's a point. If there isn't a confidentiality element to the property situation, we can have a report sometime in the future indicating where the 10 properties are that be brought into use and the potential for well, you need to be careful with other ones because then there's a commercial element involved maybe. But the ones that are already in use, the achievement is reflected in the papers. It wouldn't be difficult, I don't think, to tell members where they are.
Jim, could you come in on that?
Yep, thanks, Chair. We report monthly to the Shared Services Project Board hosted by Shelter, and there's a performance report taken there on outcomes achieved every month. So what we'd be quite happy to do is look at that report and circulate it to members of the Housing Subcommittee, and they'll be able to see exactly what work's going on in relation to what properties. As I understand it, there aren't confidentiality issues.
Okay, any other members on? Alistair.
Thanks, sir. With your leave, going back to the paragraph 3.5, Chair, we're talking there about the revenues and benefits staff and identifying properties where enforcement action may be needed. The thrust of my question, Chair, would be how many instances have we taken such enforcement action? And the reason for for putting forward the question is on the back. I make no apologies for saying it. It's in the back of Jim Dempster's earlier comments. I mean, if there is one issue, apart perhaps from dogfouling, which, as far as I'm concerned, seems to exercise, the 47 members of this council, it's the blight and the dereliction in the various settlements in Dumfries and Galloway. And we've given clear, unequivocal instructions as elected members that this problem has got to be tackled forthwith and dealt with. And it's not happening. I appreciate that maybe I should be making my complaints in another forum, i.e. the EEI committee or alternatively Planning Applications Committee. But the problem at the end of the day, Chair, seems to be that, we give clear, unequivocal instructions that this is an area of blight which we, insist is being tackled. And when you get to the level of saying, right, let's do it, I'm sorry, Chair, but too often you don't meet a can-do attitude. You're told why there's going to be difficulties, and there are various reasons that are adduced at the end of the day as to why matters can't be taken forward. And quite frankly, it's no good enough. And it's about time that we as elected members put our foot down if we have to and said, no, this is our view, this is the decisions we've taken, and these will be implemented. Thank you.
Any other members on that? No? Okay, thank you. We'll pick up that through the recommendations at the end of the... Okay, moving on to the next one, below tolerable standard. Jim, have you anything to add on that?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing to add.
Members? Jim?
Yeah, thanks once again, Chair. It's 3.9, the last bullet point. So effectively, if my reading of this one's right, somebody would be able to buy a property knowing full well that it's below tolerable standards, wait 6 months, and then apply for the grant. Is that what effectively that last bullet point is telling me?
I would read it at that, Councillor McClung, but Jim?
Thanks, Chair. The thinking behind that particular bullet point is to, again, tackle the problem of empty properties, to try and offer an incentive to people to bring them back into use. But it is entirely possible that the issue that Councillor McClung is describing could arise. We've taken the approach of looking at it strategically in terms of the overall objective is to increase the effective housing stock in the region, and what are the best ways we can achieve that. But it is entirely possible that someone could acquire a property knowing its condition, wait 6 months and apply for a grant. That would be possible.
Yeah, and that is a bit of a concern, because I think, and from this report, it proves that there was pressure on the allocated budget for this in the first case, and that's why we're looking to increase this budget. And so in that type of situation, I think there would be more suitable applications coming in that may be able to have better use of that budget rather than as you're presiding, and I would agree with you on that. Alistair?
I think the outcome would justify, the policy stance that it's being suggested that we adopt. Because very often, Chair, these empty properties, and I'm thinking of one that Jim has visited with me, that in the Galloway context, very often, they are below tolerable standards. They're bordering an a blighted condition. And as I say, if you can do that, as it were, and someone is prepared, as it were, to come in, get grant assistance, and turn it round and make it habitable and all the rest of it, have no problems with it.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I have to echo Councillor Geddes' view. We visited properties and knocked them down because folk are not willing to invest the kind of money that needed to be invested to bring them back up to an acceptable level. And personally, for traditional type of specialist properties in the middle of high streets, it's probably the only thing you can do is incentivise repairs. And I've no difficulty with it.
I mean, it may be a case that if members agree this through the recommendations, that then we closely monitor that particular section of the grants, and then at a later date we can review that. Any other members on below tolerable standard? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on, trusted trader scheme. Before we actually go into the body of this report, we have with us Sandra Harkness and Sean Skelton, who were involved in setting up the trusted trader scheme, and I would like to ask them if they would give members a quick presentation. We had a launch of the scheme on Monday there over at the municipal chambers, and it went down very well, and I thought it would be good that members of this committee understood how the scheme was set up and through the launch and its uptake and participation so far. So, well, if we can have a quick demonstration of this, and then we can go into questions.
So I'll give you a quick demonstration of how it works. Basically, the site is two separate sites. It operates through the Dumfries and Galloway website, obviously, because it's one of the most driven websites for hits for consumers, and obviously it's a council initiative. So you have several options to get to the main pages. You can search for it. It's on the most popular there. That's the way we'll access it. So you can go on through there, and then you come to this page, which is the Trusted Trader pages. On here, it contains information on how the scheme works, limitations, dispute resolution, becoming a trusted trader, and other local authority schemes. The main function for a consumer is search for an approved trader. So if we click onto that, it then directs you to a third-party site which deals with the feedback mechanisms for us. Now that's powered by reference line. You can see clearly it says reference line there, but again, clearly it shows it's a council initiative. So when you come onto here, this is the database of traders currently on the scheme. Several ways consumers can access this. They can search for what they're looking for. They can search within an area, for example, Dumfries, Gretna, Annan. Or they can search for the business by name if they know a local business and want to check the member. Another alternative, you have a list here. So if they were to click on them, say they were after an electrician, go in there. It then shows everyone that's registered as an electrician. Then click onto them again. And it'll show feedback for the consumer so they can then make an informed decision. So for example, this one here, they have 2 reviews, obviously very new, but they will build over time. So you have recent reviews, you have an overall rating from all the reviews. Words that's been used up, word cloud, that builds as it goes on, so it can be good, honest, fair price, reasonable. This section here is a section for the businesses rather than the consumers. They can have a YouTube video of their business to sell the business, and they have 750 characters or 1,000 to explain what the business is and what they do. Summary of all reviews. And then if you go down, you have the feedback section. If you go over, it shows it handwritten comments which have been scanned in individually from forms. It has it for someone such as myself where your handwriting's not so good it's been retyped. So as you can see, they have 2, and that's just one of the businesses aimed at the home improvements. But there is a remover on there because they go hand in hand. Various, and that's sort of how it works from that point of view.
Okay, thank you, Sean. I'll open it up to members. Jeff?
Yeah, I think it might be worthwhile extending it to domestic cleaners as well, because elderly people, you know, reach a point where they do need, I mean, my in-laws are in that sort of situation, yet they don't know who's going to be a good cleaner, etc. You know, and I think word of mouth is quite important. So I think that might be worth extending.
Sandra, any comments?
We are concentrating on improvement services at the moment, specifically as funding has been coming through the scheme of assistance. However, there is significant scope for extending the scheme to that type of sector, which we would consider, and other sectors that we would be looking at once we've built up a good number of home improvement sector services, because I think it's important that consumers, when they go in, they're able to actually have choice. So if we didn't restrict it to the sector, then it would be so diverse a range that you'd only have 1 or 2 of each specific thing. So once we've exhausted the market in this sector, we'd be looking to that.
I think this hopefully should give confidence as well to the consumer, and especially the elderly within our region. And it links in hand with those who are being awarded grants through the scheme of assistance as well, so that they can actually go onto the site and know that there is a trusted trader that they would be employing to carry out the works that they've been allocated the grants for. So I think it can only be good. It can help with the economy of the business that's involved with it, and help with the confidence of the consumer that is linking onto the site as well. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. Totally supportive of the development. You know, so I commend all of those concerned involved in it. Question, sir. Paragraph 3.15. Reference line has agreed to provide the web pages and feedback facility free of charge until April of next year. The offer is on condition that traders are not charged a membership fee by the council. This means, Chair, that the assumption that there will be income generated by the project in 15-16 will not now be realised. Will that be operating or militating against the council's interests as a consequence? I would like some clarification.
Sandra?
The original plan for the scheme was that when we chose to go through reference line, we knew that their contract would require that we paid £100 for each trader that we had on the scheme, and the remainder of the £200 that we had anticipated charging the trader at that point would go towards funding our administration of the scheme. However, in order to encourage an increased number of traders and to encourage the success of the scheme, obviously it's in reference line's interest, the more traders they eventually have on the scheme, they have agreed that they would provide that service to us free of charge, but only if we agreed that we would not charge the traders. That way that would entice more traders onto the scheme. So that's what we have done, and as a result we have more traders on the scheme, and they've benefited.
Grateful for the answer, sir, and I'm totally supportive of the decision that's been taken.
Cool. Any other members? Jane?
Yes, I think that's very helpful. I didn't understand it either, and I think that is helpful. But go back to the business of members talking about using this scheme. I think it's a great scheme, but how are we going to roll it out to make it available, Chairman? Because the truth is that, I mean, I don't know about Jeff's in-laws, but I know my mother would no more go on a scheme like that and look it up and fly over the moon. They just don't. There are very few elderly who would use that level of technology to inform themselves. So what else are we doing to make people who maybe support or families more aware so that they can access it for everybody who needs it?
I think it would certainly be a case, I certainly would expect that anybody that's applying for a grant through the scheme of assistance or the small repairs grant scheme, they would be handed out a leaflet or something of that sort indicating that this is available to them as well on top of that. But I understand what you're saying, Jane. There's various ways that we can encourage the use of the trusted trader scheme itself through council's marketing, etc. But Sandra, would you like to come in?
The scheme, the most effective way of accessing the scheme, John's just demonstrated, is on the website. However, we do appreciate that a large number of people who would benefit from the scheme aren't necessarily going to be able to do that. However, the council's contact centre has agreed that anyone who phones the council number will be talked through the scheme. So if they phone the council and say they're looking for a plumber, then the call operator will be able to access that for them and give them the choice over the phone. And if they need further information on top of that, then they can call trading standards as well. That will be put through by the call centre to ourselves. The reason we concentrated our publicity on the website initially is that we're mindful of the fact that the council can't provide that information at evenings and weekends, and the website is available all the time. Therefore, it's the most accessible. So during the working day, there's the option for people who can't access the website to call the council, but then obviously family members in the evening.
Jane?
I'm just thinking about where people see this sort of thing. They go to the supermarket and think about domestic abuse on the backs of loos. We've got to think cleverly about how we alert everybody to this. I'm not saying that it has to be targeted at the direct user. It's generally available. It's for everyone to use.
I mean, that's a point as well, Jane, that as an enterprising council, we should be finding ways that we can get schemes like this one and similar ones out there to the public. So that's something that we should maybe investigate. I mean, it could be highlighted through work with the food train when they're out visiting households and and other organisations like that. Whether we do we have leaflets available for going out advertising, leaflets as such, or information leaflets rather than advertising. And I appreciate you'll only have had a certain number printed at this time, but as the scheme moves forward and we see the popularity of it, then we maybe have to reprint and look at these sort of organisations to help us get that information out there.
We have a radio campaign at the moment, which is over a 5-week period. This is week 2, and it's aimed at consumers just to alert them to make them aware. 380 adverts going out over the next 4 weeks. It's been running for a week. We also have pop-up banners that we're going to place in libraries and move them around, put them in customers' centres. We have leaflets. We have worked with the food train in the past to target vulnerable adults, so we will be using that again and put out our leaflets, and we do have a stock of leaflets aimed at businesses and leaflets aimed at
Finlay?
Thanks. Just regards to reference line, where do they get their revenue from providing this service? And do you foresee at any time in the future that they may decide to charge for the website and the functionality? And if we're talking about advertising the service and the businesses within that service, whether that may be Jane's suggestion, whatever, can you foresee the time where you would wish to charge some sort of joining fee or membership fee? And you know, what's the plan going forward if reference line did decide that they wanted to charge us?
We have an agreement with reference line for this next financial year that they won't charge us. So we know that for the next year we do not require to charge businesses, and we know what our financial is going to be. Reference line actually work with a number of trade associations in the private sector, and the revenue comes from there. And also the other council schemes that they work with, they're at various different stages of implementation, and they are currently charging them, and those councils are charging the traders, and it tends to be £200 per member. The negotiations with reference line are council by council, so that's the deal that we have negotiated with them. There's no guarantee that this time next year, well, they very possibly will decide to start charging us £100 a member. However, reference line themselves are looking at sponsorship options, so we've to have discussions with them in the next year. So it may be that their revenue will come from elsewhere, and it doesn't need to come from our trader members. So that's the work that we need to do in this next financial year, during the period where we know where we are and we have a stable situation. But that's work.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, just reiterating, I do think, given the demographics of the region, I appreciate the demand on the time, is that we do need to get cleaners on there as soon as possible. So I think, you know, looking at these are sort of situations where you may use once in a lifetime in terms of solar panel installation, etc., whereas elderly people and cleaners, you know, goes along together. But just looking for how easy it is to find this on the council website. I mean, I don't find the council website particularly easy when you're using the search engine. You think, what on earth are all these hits coming up? You know, they've got nothing to do. And I see that search has been done on plumbers and decorators. Can I have assurance that if I type plumbers into the council website, it'll come up with this? Or will it lead to 2,000 hits?
Sandra?
I haven't searched plumbers, Dumfries and Galloway. My route to find the trusted trader is to Google Dumgal trusted trader, and it comes up easily, and it's easy to find. I don't know what comes up if you put in plumbers. It very possibly it will come up with that page. Try it.
That's my concern. You have to know the name of the scheme in order to search for it. I think possibly need to hone or improve the way in which you can actually search for this within the council website. Otherwise, people just give up and say, well, it's not worth it. You know, as I say, you get 2,000 hits. And trust the trade, it might be 1,990 on the list.
I think, Jeff, when Sean did the demonstration at the start, it's a click from the home page of the council website. It's just a single click. It's up. Trusted Trader is listed on the front page of the home page, on our home page. So it should just be a click on there and take you right through to here. Is that right, Sean?
it is at the moment, but these things tend to get pushed down the hierarchy and disappear off the end. So, you know, there's no guarantee that will be there in a year's time. Then in terms of the search.
Okay, Alistair?
No, I was just going back to the question I asked Sandra earlier. So, you know, let me be quite clear in my own mind, apart from anything else. What essentially you said, if I understood you, and more importantly, perhaps heard you correctly, was in fact that you were agreeing to this arrangement pro tem to increase the number of traders who would participate in the scheme. And obviously that will be reviewed going forward. That was essentially what you said. Is that the case?
That's right. We were aiming to maximise the number of businesses that would come onto the scheme. I think if we charged a membership fee, we may have been as successful, but we've certainly not had any difficulty attracting businesses that have been aware of the scheme. We've not had any difficulty getting them.
Yes, Alice.
On the back of that, sir, what are the sort of quality control, you know, sort of arrangements, for want of a better term? Because, you know, well, there are some tradespeople that I wouldn't go to if I was looking for work done in my home. So what's the arrangements going to be for quality control aspects of the scheme?
Sandra?
We have a long list of criteria that we check the traders against. The main issue and the first and foremost one is that they are traders within Dumfries and Galloway, and they actually have a business address that they can be traced to within Dumfries and Galloway. They may have other depots elsewhere, but it's local traders who we can actually put to an address. But we also have other criteria. We'll compare them. We'll look at our list of consumer complaints, for example, against that trader. We'll look at membership of trade associations. If they're declaring that they're a member of a trade association, we'll check that they actually are. They don't need to be. We'll also check their insurance.
Okay. Jim?
It's back again, just information sharing here, because if you're going to be successful, you're going to have the folk advised how to access the information. And one of my community councils is an electronic notice board. So if you were to provide them with information, they might put it up in an electronic notice board, which is running 24 hours a day, even if it's just to signpost the people to community customer services or libraries. You know, just go there, a member of staff will help you search for the particular service you want, because you want to make it user friendly. And if that is, and these electronic notice boards are in post offices and all sorts of places, and there's a rolling index of information. But I think it'd be useful if you can do that. And on a lighter note, on 315, fourth line to the bottom, I hope none of the tradesmen are taking their clothes off.
Yeah, I think the success
bearing
of
the cost, but bears no spelt the right way.
I mean, the success of the scheme for both the business and the user is, of course, the information being out there so everybody knows it's available to them. So that's certainly where we need to concentrate. I know it's taken a lot of time in developing the scheme, and as members seem to agree, they're very supportive of it, and it's been a very worthwhile project. But it's just keeping that knowledge out there for the consumer to know that we are hosting the scheme, and it is backed by Dumfries and Galloway Council. Any other members? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on. Last part of the report, finance considerations. There's a couple of tables there highlighting that, which we'll pick up as well on the recommendations. But if anybody has any comments on that at this time? No? Okay, thank you. Then we'll go back to the recommendations. 2.1, note that it is mandatory under Scottish Government regulations to transfer the care and repair, small repairs and home support services into the new integrated health and social care body, and any future decisions in relation to the delivery of these services will be a matter for the integrated joint board, as detailed at 3.22 of the report. 2.2, note that as part of its budget setting and council tax process, the council agreed at its meeting on 5th of February 14 to reduce the annual funding allocation to care and repair from 1.5 to 1.3, as detailed at 3.2 of the report. 2.3, note that as part of its budget setting and council tax process, the council agreed at its meeting on the 5th of February 14 to adopt a policy of not undertaking discretionary adaptations and property extensions, except where exceptional circumstances as detailed at 3.24 of the report. 2.4, note that the referral process will align eligibility for care and repair service with the social work services eligibility and priority framework from 1516, so that resources are targeted only at people assessed as having critical needs can access as detailed at 3.3 of the report. 2.5, agree to allocate £300,000 to Low Urban Housing Association as a one-year transitional fund to ensure the delivery of grants to people already assessed as having a substantial need under current policy, with the fund being retained as a contingency by the council and released to the care and repair by agreement of the care and repair steering group based on an active budget monitoring process as detailed 3.3 of the report. 2.6, agree to allocate £148,000 to Low Urban Housing Association to fund the small pairs and housing support services for 1516 as detailed 3.21 of this report, and further agree to ring fence an additional 12,000 of the total 300,000 contingency fund to address potential budget pressures to the handyvan service may face in 1516, which will be released by them to them by agreement to the steering group based on active budget monitoring processes detailed at 3.2 of the report. 2.7, agree to allocate 37,400 to the food train to allow the delivery of the extra element of the service as detailed at 3.2. 2.8, agree to develop a shared service approach to empty homes of Scottish Borders Council. Councillor McClung.
Yeah, I would propose along the lines of to agree to fund a permanent full-time post empty homes officer at an estimated cost of £40,000 to be funded from the additional income generated as a result of the increase of council tax charges applied to long-term empty residential property. That really is just what policy and resources agreed to with the deletion of one word and the addition of two.
Alistair?
I would second that, sir.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
Can I just ask for clarification on this? Have we already set up a permanent post? Have we done that already? If we have, then what I'm about to say is irrelevant. If we haven't, then if I could come back. So could I have that straight answer?
Well, okay, Jim. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Thanks, Chair. The current post is temporary and shared with Scottish Borders and East Lothian councils and is due to end in August.
The current port is temporary, but it was agreed by this subcommittee and policy resources to set up a full-time post. So that agreement is already in place.
Right. Okay. So there is agreement, but there is not currently a post. Doesn't exist at the moment. There is a suggestion that should be.
No, it's not a suggestion, Jane. There's an agreement. There is committee decision to agree to a full-time post. And it's not implemented because, as Mr. Lynch said, the funding from the homes wasn't available to them at the time.
Right. Okay. So in that case, I'd be quite interested. I would have thought that committee decision, and if it wasn't funded, actually is really null and void. It doesn't exist.
No, it's still, John, I would say it's still a committee decision. You can have a committee decision and then allocate funding when it's available.
Right. Well, I would suggest to members, I mean, how many empty homes do we know is going to go forward? Do we know that we want to set up another post?
I think it's in the report, Jane, that the workload is there. I mean, it has stated in the report that the workload is there for a full-time officer.
There is certainly an active caseload of 44, and that would suggest that there is another 4 years to go.
No, it's certainly not how I would take it, but Jim, I'll let you come in first.
Thanks, Chair. The figures in the report are the number of empty homes that the current part-time post holder is working on. However, through the implementation of the council tax surcharge, we've identified somewhere in the region of 100 empty properties in the region, that obviously the current post holder doesn't have the capacity to work on all of those. So moving to a full-time post would create that capacity to look at more of them. So the report just reflects the post holder's current caseload rather than the number of empty homes in the region. We know that that is a much greater number. We know that.
We do have a motion.
With your leave,
James.
Chairman, then really what I'm getting at is that before members get all sort of cross and tetchy about it, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't do the work, but what we've actually talked about here in this committee is the split and the lack of joined up thinking. Empty homes lead to derelict homes. And the derelict homes, nothing's happening with, that a number of members feel that they don't feel that there is a proper connection between the whole business of empty and derelict. And I'm absolutely with them. What my concern is that have we got a process and suitable staff and a coherent programme to make sure that we're tackling both the issues that we're trying to do. What I don't want to do is set up a post which is somewhere over here in housing, which goes on and on and on forever and ever and ever, is ring-fenced and it's looked after, but never speaks to other parts of the council with which we are attempting to make some sort of headway, the derelict properties. So let's think about this before we actually just rush forward and and say, yes, let's put in a post and let's pay for it, and away we go. I'm just concerned that it's not as joined up as it should be.
Well, I mean, this has been discussed and carefully thought through by members of this committee in the past, Jane, but I'll let Jim just reaffirm that before I come back to members.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Sorry.
Sorry, Jim O'Neill. Sorry, Jim, I'll be there to admit.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I think that in our empty homes work, there's an absolute recognition that it's a very complex area. There are many factors at play resulting in a home being empty, and the current post holder works across a whole range of council departments to try and bring empty homes back into use. So, for example, we regularly work with planning colleagues, building control, social work as well, for example, because it can be elderly people that have had to leave their house and go into residential care. So it's a very joined up approach that we take to the work. And to be honest, at this point, I would like to apologise to members for probably contributing to the confusion by writing the recommendation the way that it is, because the point made by Councillor McClung in government's terms is actually correct. That decision has already been made, and the recommendation, albeit well-intentioned in my part to save money, has actually contributed to the confusion at committee today.
Thank you. Jim, Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry for butting in. I just heard Jim. The motion's been moved to change it. It's been seconded. However, I would also just pass comment. It's a dangerous assumption for anybody to make as a councillor that a decision that's been made at policy and resources becomes null and void because the money isn't available at the time. That would put a whole lot of projects, one of which, to put it in context, would be the Kirkcudbright Charter, because there's money's not available there. So by that reason, does that mean the Kirkcudbright Charter funding falls?
Okay, Jeff.
Just to go back with what Jane was saying, I mean, we already have a part-time person fulfilling this post and fulfilling very effectively on the remit which we've got at the moment. All we want to do is to agree the decision which was made by Policy and Resources and fund this on a full-time basis.
And Alistair, you wanted to come in? No? Okay. Jim?
Just the derelict properties are sitting in a different place, but obviously Jim has announced that the dovetail in that officer works across our department, so they will liaise anyway. So that puts to bed any worry that there's no cohesion.
So we do have a motion on the table. Do we have an amendment to that motion? No? Okay. Thank you. Claire, would you just to reassure members, would you just read that out, please, so we're clear in what goes into the recommendation?
Okay, I've got, agree that a post of a permanent full-time Empty Homes Officer is progressed as agreed by Policy and Resources in December 2013 at an estimated cost of 40k, be funded by the increase in council tax for second home.
Councillor McClung.
Was specifically the long-term empty properties rather than the second homes. It's just a technicality, but it was the increase in long-term empties.
Yeah, apologies.
Yes, we'll take note of that. Thank you. Okay, moving on, 2.9 of the recommendations. Agree to allocate £30,000 to support the further development of the Trusted Trader Scheme during 15-16, as detailed as 3.15 of this report. 2.10, agree to allocate £500,000 to support the delivery of the below tolerable standard elements of the 15-16 scheme of assistance, as detailed at 3.6 to 3.12 of this report. 2.11, agree to the adjustments in the below tolerable standard grant qualifying criteria set out in section 3.10 of this report. And yes, Claire, come in, please.
Sorry, did members want to expand that to include close monitoring of the change of the criteria that the property needs to be owned for a 6-month period prior to making an application?
Members happy with that? Thank you. 2.12, agree to ring fence 85,000 of the recommended 500,000 funding allocation to tackle below tolerable standard issues with other disrepair elements to enable DGHP to carry out repairs in specific platted blocks where there is a mix of social rented tenants and owner occupiers, as detailed at 3.11 of this report. 2.13, agree to ring fence £40,000 to support structural disrepair elements of the mixed tenure the Home Energy Efficiency Programme Area-Based Scheme Project, detailed at 3.12 of this report. And 2.14, agree an additional allocation of £904,700 from council tax income on second homes to ensure all elements of the scheme of assistance are fully funded, noting that the majority of this additional funding is a one-year transitional funding, that there are sufficient balances in the council tax second home funds, and that the allocation of this funding for 15-16 will not inhibit the allocation of funding to support other priority projects in future years, as detailed at paragraph 3.16. Thank you, members. I have no further business at this point in the meeting. So we'll move on to the next part of the agenda. Yeah, well, I'll read it out first. Item 6 on the agenda, Local Government Scotland Act, consider adoption of resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A and paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 7A and the Local Government Scotland Act. Members happy to adopt this? Thank you. So I'll give a couple of moments for members of the public